Hey everybody, I hope you guys can see me. I'm just going to just want to say hi and welcome to the Food Freedom Program. I can't even tell you how thrilled I am that you guys are here with me, and kudos to you for signing up for this. You're getting in on the ground floor. I appreciate your coming on this ride with me. This course is designed to help you navigate your special diet in a way that's useful for you. So I really want this course to be excellent for you guys and give you everything you need. And the beauty of doing this together live, because even though I can't see you, I can see your comments live underneath the video, is that you get to have input on this course as the people who are going through it for the first time. So I know that the course right now is designed to deal with gluten-free, egg-free, dairy-free, sugar-free. But if there's something specific that you have that you want to deal with, we can do that because we can. It's the first run through, and I'm going to be developing this as we go. So I definitely want to hear from you guys as much as possible. And I'm just going to start us off because I know we have a lot of material. So what I'm going to do tonight, I'm just going to say hello first for those of you who may not know me. I know some of you have followed me, but even before I do that, I want to double check that the technology is working because this is how I'm delivering the information. So could somebody just in the chat box below just type yes if you can hear me, and then once I'm sure that you can do that, then I will continue. So I will, there's a little bit of a delay, but if somebody could just type yes, I'll check in a couple seconds and just to be sure. And then I'm going to get started with our material because we have a lot to cover. So I don't see it yet. If you could let me know if you can see me. And I know it's just 8 o'clock, so but I want to be sure that the sound is good here. I've got my speakers on. I just want to double check. So anybody, please let me know if you can hear me. There's a chat box underneath. Just say yes if you can hear me, and we'll go from there. Let me refresh again. I'm going to have to assume the answer is yes if I don't see anything. I know there's some people watching because I can see here. So please just say yes if you can hear me. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take a look at the video myself just to make sure it's running. Yes, thank you, Mary. Oh, Mary, I'm so glad you got in. That's great that you made it. Okay, terrific. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be sharing a little bit on PowerPoint, but then I might go back and forth because I want to hear from you guys as we move through it. So for those of you who don't know my background, I just wanted to say a little bit about me. And I think what I'll do is I will start by going to the PowerPoint. Let's see if we can do this. And here it is, share. Okay, so let me start us off. And there we go. Okay, so tonight is our first session. And I want to welcome you again. And here's what we're going to be doing tonight. So just a general introduction to the program and how it's put together and how I'm going to share the information with you. And then specifically tonight is more of a foundational class. So I know a lot of people are really keen to learn about how do you cook this way or that way, and we'll be delving deeply into that as we go along with the course. But I'm just checking to make sure that you can actually see this. So as we go through, yes, starting next week, I'm going to be talking about gluten-free, for instance, and then we're going to move to egg and dairy and sugar. But tonight I want to lay the foundation so that everything that happens after tonight, you've got that basis. So it's kind of an introduction, and I'll talk about the number one thing you need to know, I think, for success on a special diet so that you can stick with it. And then the fundamental principles of healthy food in general, which will relate to everything that you eat, whatever your dietary restrictions, and the fundamental principles of what to buy, because you need to be able to find the food. So the first part is intros, my diet then and now, and I have and you. And so what I'm going to do is just go back to me for a few seconds, because I wanted to tell you about my diet. But while I'm talking, I've got a couple of my link stating starts in 1 hour does not work. Oh, Mary, sorry. Oh my goodness. Okay, so and I see that Mary Winstanley is also soy and corn free. So that's great information. And let me take a few minutes to ask you about that afterwards too. So while I'm talking, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how my diet changed. I'd love it if you could just write underneath what kind of diet you're on very, very briefly, because one of the things I'm going to do is ask you to send me information on that. But in any case, so I'm kind of the classic SAD diet, SAD, or standard American diet kid. I grew up eating all kinds of junk, like all kinds of junk. I just love junk food. I love sweets. I love processed food, like anything you can think of that's not healthy, I like it. And I really think that that's the major reason that I ended up being so ill. And so my diet changed completely, radically. So I went from eating like Pringles and, as some of you know, canned frosting, and even just stuff that I made myself because I was always a baker and I knew how to cook from a young age. I would make things that were not healthy. You know, I could have ramen noodles for dinner, just noodles and water and nothing else, and a day of carbs, that kind of thing. So when I changed my diet, I went plant-based. So that would be free of meats and eggs and dairy and milk and anything that comes from an animal, and a lot of plant foods. I am gluten-free. I'm about 90% grain-free now as well. And because of the Candida diet, I don't drink alcohol, I don't drink coffee, I don't eat mushrooms, I don't eat peanuts, a few other things. So it's the classic kind of diet where people hear the way you eat and they go, what's left to eat? What do you eat, right? But I will tell you, I do not feel deprived, and I don't even miss any of those foods anymore because I have found a way to recreate virtually every food that I love. So I know that's going to be the case for you, and that's why I'm here to help you with that. So I wanted to just give you that introduction personally from me, and I'm dying to hear from you guys too. So again, if you want to just put stuff below the screen, and Mary Kroll is aiming for gluten-free, ultimately needs to be anti-candida. And gluten-free is a great way to start, Mary. So that's terrific. And Jacqueline, gluten and dairy-free except for kefir. Yeah, which is actually good because of the probiotics. So limited grain. So we're similar in that way. So again, just to quickly go through how I want to structure this course, and again, I wanted to involve a lot of your feedback because I want you guys to shape this course so that it works for you. So the way it's set up now is just like this, just sort of similar to the way that the webinar was, which is a live session plus live chat beneath it. We also have the option of live calls, and that would mean that I could hear your voice rather than read your chat, read you in the chat box. So either way, though, it's live for this run through of the program. And I do also want to let you know that as the first run of this program, this is the only time I'm doing these live Q&As at the end. So your questions will not be part of the final program when I turn it into a self-study program. I'm going to use the materials and the recordings of the materials, but don't worry that what you're asking will be broadcast for everybody to see for all eternity. These questions will remain between us, and then when I reissue the program, it will not include all of the discussion. That won't be part of it, just so that you know. There's also the Facebook group, and I think this is an integral part of the course, so important for in the Facebook group, and it's called The Sweet Life Online on Facebook. And if you have not received the link in one of your emails from me, let me know, because I would highly, highly, strongly recommend that you go to the Facebook group and join. It is a wonderful group of women, because we're all women, and I just love the people in that Facebook group, and they're active, they are smart, they give fabulous advice, ask terrific questions. We've had some recipes exchanged in there. It's just a really fantastic place for you to get support and ask questions and interact with people who are going through the same thing. It might not be the exact same restrictions, but they understand what it's like to be on a restricted diet. And then we're going to have a whole series of handouts, and the slides of these PowerPoint presentations, you will get copies of that. And I'm working on transcriptions so that you could get notes for people who prefer to read rather than listen, as well as hopefully we're going to look at MP3s so that you can get an audio. And I'm not quite sure how to do that yet, but I'm working on that with someone who can help me. Now, and just to say about the handouts, they're on the portal page. So there's that main Food Freedom page on my blog that's password protected. When you go to that page, all the handouts each week will be added as you go. Also, very important, don't forget your book, because as a member of this program, you get a copy of your choice of one of my 2 books, A Naturally Sweet and Gluten-Free or Living Candida-Free. And I want you to take advantage of that. So if you're in the Sweet Life, or you've already been in the Sweet Life for a while, then you already have the book. But for anyone who just joined, don't forget to send me an email with your name and address, and you will get a copy of the book. And then the other thing I want to say is, in between sessions, don't be shy. That's what the Facebook group is for. You can ask any of your questions, and certainly here at the end of the class, if there's anything that comes up, that's what I'm here for. I want you to ask anything so that you're clear on anything that may be a question, whether it's related specifically to today's lecture or not. You can ask whatever you need to ask. And I am obliged to give you my disclaimer. As you know, I am not a doctor or a medical professional, and so the information in this course is purely for your information. If you want to implement anything that we talk about, please speak to your healthcare practitioner first, as I cannot prescribe or diagnose or tell you to do any of this. This is purely informational purposes for you guys. Okay, so let's dive in. The number 1 factor for success, as I see it, what I think is essential for someone to be successful on a new diet. And I know that for some of you it's not brand new, and for some of you it is brand new, but I want to refer back a little bit to the book that I mentioned in the webinar, if you were on the webinar that I did last week, called The Power of Habit, because I think his name is Charles Duhigg, and this will be one of the resources I can link to for you. But I think he really talks about one of the key factors in success for sticking with anything that you want to make a new habit. So if your diet is a change for you, then you want to be sure that it becomes a habit. And Duhigg said that anybody, he talks about the habit loop. So he says the way that we end up repeating behaviors or creating habits is because there's a cue, then there's the behavior, which he calls the routine, and then there's some kind of reward. So for instance, in my case, because I am a sugar addict, you know, let's say, and I tend to be an emotional eater. So let's say I won't say a fight, let's say I have a disagreement with my sister on the phone. We tend to have a lot of disagreements. So let's say I have a disagreement with my sister, and so I'm upset, and I go to the fridge or the freezer, and I grab some chocolate chip cookie dough, let's say, and this is I'm referring to what I would have done years ago, because I don't even have that in my freezer anymore. But let's just say I go get some chocolate chip cookie dough, I eat it. So the cue is the argument. That's the sort of thing that cues my behavior. The behavior or the habit or the routine is the eating the chocolate chip cookie dough. And then there's a reward, which is the 3rd factor. And that for me would be the comfort that I feel, or the sense of soothing that I feel, the emotional soothing that I feel when I eat that cookie dough, or just after I'm eating that cookie dough. So what Duhigg says is to change it up. So for instance, if you want to eat something else instead of the cookie dough, like maybe gluten-free, sugar-free cookie dough, the cue stays the same at the beginning, the reward stays the same at the end, but what you need to do is switch up the middle, or the routine. And how do you do that? You find something else that will give you the same reward. So in my case, maybe a piece of sugar-free chocolate if I want to stick with food. But maybe it's something totally different, like I have a disagreement. I know now, because I've thought about the reward, I know what I'm really seeking is some sense of emotional comfort. I go play with my dogs instead, and that's the new habit. And then I get the same reward, which is the comfort. So he talks about how people make it stick, and why they did studies on people who quit smoking, for instance, and some kept away from the cigarettes and some didn't. So this is what he says. We know that a habit cannot be eradicated. It must instead be replaced. And we know that habits are most malleable when the golden rule of habit change is applied. If we keep the same cue and same reward, a new routine can be inserted in the middle. But that's not enough. And I think this is very important. For a habit to stay changed, people must believe it is possible. And most often, belief only emerges with the help of a group. So two things there that I think are very, very important. And that's why I bolded the words, people must believe it is possible. And you know I'm a big Oprah fan. And Oprah says, you become what you believe. So just the change in belief. If you begin to think of yourself as someone who eats healthfully, you are someone who eats gluten-free. You are someone who eats sugar-free. You are someone who eats corn and soy-free. Whatever your particular free from is, that has to happen internally. There has to be a shift in mindset so you truly believe that you are now one of these people. And the best way for that to happen, he says, is with the help of a group. And so, as I said, they did studies of, say, people smoking cessation. They did studies of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they found that Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the reasons it worked so well is because you were surrounded by people who understood your experience or were going through the same thing or had already gone through the same thing. And so that's why again, I'm going to say, I feel that the Facebook group is so integral to this program, because you want to be able to talk about what you're going through with other people who are going through the same thing. And that is going to be crucial to your ultimate success. And also, believe me, I never thought of myself as somebody who could go without sugar for the rest of her life. If someone had told me that 10 years ago, I would, or no, I guess it's been 15 years now. If someone had said that to me in my 30s or 20s, that you're going to be eating, you're going to have a life with no sugar in it, I would have said, you are insane, and probably a few more colorful words than that. But you know what? Over time, and as you're doing it, you do begin to believe that that's who you are. And so now that's probably one of the strongest characteristics that I see in myself. So the belief is crucial. And I think that's one of the first steps you need to make before you even think about starting to eat differently. The other thing to think about is, I'm going to say change isn't bad, it's just different. So again, like if you think about any time you made a major change in your life, it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative, like moving from one house to another house. They're different, but it doesn't mean that one is better or worse than the other. I just got an email today. I follow this woman's emails. I'm on her newsletter list. And she was talking about how when she moved to Toronto, I think it was 5 years ago, she actually originally moved for a romantic relationship, which broke up very quickly. And then she was sort of stuck in Toronto from London, England. And now she loves Toronto. And she was saying how it's not that she no longer loves London, but she loves Toronto equally, just differently. You know, and it's like our parents, or if you are a parent, you probably say this to your kids. I love you both, but just differently. So you can still love the new food that you're going to eat. I love my sweets. I love food, period. And so this is something that's just now slightly different from the kind of food I ate before. And then the third thing, I think, speaking of the kinds of changes that are important, embrace the adventure. Think of it as something new and fun. It doesn't have to feel like an overwhelming burden. It can actually be fun, trying out new foods, playing with recipes. Make it into a game, and that can really, really make a huge difference. So, okay, I want to look at the sort of foundation of food. And if this is review for some of you, I know some of you might know this stuff already, but this, I think, applies to everyone, no matter which kind of special diet you are on, to understand the main categories of the food that we eat, so that when you are looking into these new kinds of foods, then you'll know what it is to look for. So the macronutrients, macro means large, so the macronutrients are just the kinds of foods that we eat in the largest quantities of the food. So they're the largest part of the foods we get. That's the carbohydrates, the proteins, and the fats. And the macronutrients are as opposed to the micronutrients, which are things like vitamins and minerals. So we need the macronutrients in large quantities and the micronutrients in smaller quantities. So the first one, and the one we probably well, I wouldn't say we're necessarily most familiar with. I was most familiar with is the carbs. And it's interesting. I had brunch with one of my good friends on the weekend, and she said to me, "I'm not going to eat carbs anymore because she's not losing weight. She feels like she's bloated. She's, her arthritis is bothering her. She feels like she's got a lot of inflammation. So she decided to cut carbs out of her diet. So she said, we ordered brunch, and she had an omelet with spinach and cheese and onions. Well, guess what? She ate carbs. So, when you look at these pictures, for instance, whoops, I keep losing my cursor here. When you look at these pictures, this is gluten-free soda bread. These recipes, except for this, these are both on my blog. Gluten-free soda bread and pancakes. Well, we all think of those as carbs, but you might not think of a plate of raw vegetables as carbs, but they are. So carbs are plant foods, and they include things like fruits and vegetables. So there really is pretty much no such thing as being entirely carb-free in your diet, or all you would eat is protein and fat. And if you're ketogenic, I know I have a friend who's 70% fat in her diet, but even she still eats some carbs. You've got to have carbs. Why? Because carbs provide most of the energy in the body. They are key for energy. They're what's called the cleanest burning form of energy. So when your body burns carbs, it leaves the least amount of toxins behind as compared to protein and fat, which takes more energy to burn. And also, carbs they're key in the body to regulate protein and fat metabolism as well. Depending who you ask, if you're looking at, and again, I'm not talking about something like a ketogenic diet here, which is mostly fat, but most experts would recommend between 50 and 70% of total calories, especially if you're plant-based, more plant-based, come from carbs. So again, we're not talking sugar, and we're not talking flour, but I'm talking the healthy carbs, like the vegetables. So let me just go through the different kinds of carbs that there are. There are 3 categories of carbohydrates, and they are the sugars, the starches, and the fibers. Fiber is actually considered one form of carbohydrate. And starches is the term that's used in nutrition, which is not quite the same as like arrowroot starch or something like that. So I'll talk about what these are. So sugars are the most basic form, and they're the easiest to digest and the quickest to be converted into glucose, which is blood sugar. So sugars are either single or double molecules. So they can be called mono or disaccharides, and saccharide just means sugar. And as I said, they're converted very quickly into glucose in the body. Then we have, there are 3 kinds of monosaccharides. They're glucose, fructose, and galactose. And these aren't even necessarily important to remember. I'm just giving you the names. You probably have heard about fructose, which is fruit sugar, and galactose is actually the sugar that comes from milk. It's broken down into lactose, which comes from milk. Then we have another form, glucose, which is another form of sugars, and that would be blood sugar, as I said. And the disaccharides, the ones that have 2 molecules, are sucrose, which is your regular common table sugar, the white sugar, lactose, which is the form of sugar that comes in milk, and maltose, which is a form of sugar that comes from grains, like barley or something like that. So basically, in terms of the sugars, the takeaway is if it ends in OSE, O-S-E, it's a sugar. And so you want to be careful of the sugars, because the sugars are the ones that are going to spike your blood sugar, or glucose. They're going to break down to glucose the fastest, spike your blood sugar, cause cravings, all those good things that you really don't want in the body. So ideally, you want to be staying away from those simple sugars that I just mentioned. And this is, by the way, all on the handouts on the main page. So as I said, you don't need to remember this stuff because you're going to have a record of it. The starches is the mid category, and they're a little bit more complicated or complex. And those are actually also referred to as complex carbs, because the starches, they're also called polysaccharides. So if the sugars only have 1 or 2 molecules, the polysaccharides, the starches, have many molecules. And they're called complex carbs because they're harder for your body's digestive system to break them down into sugar, simple sugar. So a complex carb or starch would be things like a whole grain that has the hull still on it. It would be these vegetables, right? These vegetables are complex carbs. They've got they have to be broken down from the many components as you chew them and as your body digests them. And most importantly, these complex carbs do not spike your blood sugar because there's a slow release of glucose a little bit at a time as your body's breaking them down. So the starches are the kind of foods you really want to seek out and eat because they're great for pretty much your health in general. And again, depending on what kind of diet you're on, normally the complex carbs are very basic and very simple to recognize. It's just a whole food. So it's pretty easy to tell whether it's one of your foods that you're allowed to eat or not. And then the third one is fiber. So fiber is the part of the plant, and again, these all come from plants, the part of the plant that our bodies cannot digest or break down. So basically, it's just like if you think of the bulk in foods, that's the fiber, the category called fiber. And cellulose is another name for fiber. So there's two kinds of fibers. There's soluble and insoluble. And the soluble fiber is the kind that can absorb water. So, for instance, things like the flesh of plants, like the inside of an apple. Oatmeal is known to be a kind of soluble fiber because it plumps up and it absorbs liquid and then plumps up and gets bigger. Things like psyllium husk seed, which I use a lot in my baking as a binder, but psyllium is the main ingredient in Metamucil, which is a laxative, or I guess it's a medication used to help people who are constipated to move the stool through the bowel. And the reason that is because it bulks up. So the soluble fiber is great because it makes our food have more bulk and it holds water, which keeps it nice and soft. And that helps your stool to move through the digestive tract. But the other kind of fiber, which is insoluble, that means it just stays the same. It doesn't absorb liquid at all. That's the kind that creates almost like a sweeping motion of like a broom that sweeps through the intestines and helps things move that way. So you really need both the soluble and the insoluble. Insoluble comes from things like wheat bran. So if you think of like the real fibrous parts of plants, like celery stalks, you can sometimes even see those strings of fiber in celery stalks. That's the insoluble fiber. And the soluble is the one that does absorb liquid. The skin of the apple is insoluble, whereas the flesh of the apple is soluble. And both of them work together as they work through your body and work through the digestive tract. So that's the carbs. Then the second category of macronutrients is proteins, which most of us are familiar with. But proteins are so important. They make up all of the solid aspects of your body. So things like your hair, your teeth, your nails, your muscles, your eyes, all your internal organs, part of your blood is actually considered protein. So apart from water, which is the greatest percentage, believe it or not, of the human body, protein is the second greatest percentage of the human body. And protein molecules are made up of things called amino acids. And there are 22 total, but 9 of them are considered essential amino acids, which means our body can't make those essential amino acids itself. You have to get those amino acids from the food that you eat. So you want to be sure when you're eating protein that you're getting all of those essential amino acids. So what are the protein requirements for the average person? How much protein do you actually need in a day? This might surprise you. It's just 0.8 grams per kilogram. So if you're not someone who works in metric, what does that mean? Well, that means you only need 0.8 grams of protein per 2.2 pounds of body weight. So if you weigh 150 pounds, that works out to 55 grams of protein a day. So the average woman is about 50 to 55 grams of protein per day. But if you consider that all foods, whether carbs or straight up protein, contain some protein, then it can add up pretty quickly and you'll be surprised. So for example, we've got animal and vegetable sources of protein. The animal sources probably you're familiar with. Things like animal flesh. So, meat, chicken, fish, eggs, cheese, milk might have a little bit of protein in it. Those are animal sources of protein. And if the average person requires 50 grams a day, consider this a 3-ounce steak. So 3 ounces is really small. Like an average restaurant here in the Toronto area, and I know it's probably even bigger in the US, when my husband and I go out to dinner and he orders a steak, they usually give him a 10-ounce steak, which means more than 3 times what I'm about to tell you. A 3-ounce steak has 23 grams of protein. So that would be 69 grams just in his steak. And he only needs about 50 to 60 grams for the whole day. So animal protein, you really do not need a lot to get your protein. 3 ounces of flesh like chicken or meat or turkey breast or a piece of fish, they're all about 23 grams for 3-ounce serving, which is, as I said, quite a small serving. With vegetable, we have lots of sources of protein, and some are better than others, but some of the best I've got pictured here. So these are actually chickpea fries over here. So beans and legumes are fabulous sources of protein. This is tempeh. It's a tempeh bourguignon, and this all these recipes are on my blog actually. So tempeh bourguignon, which is tempeh is a soy product that is fermented, so it's more easily digested than is tofu. And this is a quinoa salad with some kale and some blueberries and so on. So quinoa is a grain, or it's called a pseudo grain because it's actually technically not a grain, but we all think of quinoa as a grain. So for vegetable, beans and legumes in general, about a half a cup serving is about 120 milliliters of cooked beans and legumes, gives you between 12 to 16 grams of protein. So that's really terrific. If you think about, you have a bowl of chili, that's probably a cup of beans and legumes. That's going to be 26 grams right there, half your daily requirement, or a little bit more actually than your daily requirement. Nuts and seeds, just an ounce, which is about 28 grams of almonds or pumpkin seeds. Almonds are 6 grams of protein, and pumpkin seeds give you 9 grams. And hemp seeds, 1 ounce, gives you 10 grams of protein. And even vegetables, a cup of kale has 2 grams of protein. So it really does all add up over the course of the day, and it's not difficult to achieve your protein requirements. So again, depending if you're worried that you can't have certain foods and you're afraid you're not going to be able to meet your macronutrient requirements, it's really usually pretty easy to top them up from other categories or with other foods that will have similar macronutrients. And I just want to take one quick moment to talk about protein complementarity because I follow a plant-based diet and I know some of you do too. As I was saying earlier, the essential amino acids, the 9 essential amino acids, we need to get all of those to have complete proteins that our body needs. And when you eat animal products, you're getting all of them, no problem. All the animal products contain the right amounts of those 9 amino acids. The problem with eating 100% plant-based is, and it's actually not a problem because we found out it isn't a problem, but the issue that people used to talk about is that not all plant foods have all those 9 in the one food. So for instance, beans and legumes are known to be high in certain amino acids, but low in other amino acids, whereas grains are high in different amino acids and low in other amino acids. So this concept of protein complementarity began, and the idea there is if you want to get all 9 amino acids at the same meal, then you should always combine 2 categories of plant protein. So the categories are beans and legumes, nuts and seeds is the second category, and the third category is grains. So in other words, if I ate these chickpea fries and I had some nuts on the side, or if I ate these chickpea fries and I had some grains on the side, that combination of the legumes and the grains, or the legumes and the nuts, would give me a complete protein right there, even though it was plant-based, because they all add up together. Same thing with this salad. It has nuts in it, so I'm getting the grain quinoa, and I think there's walnuts in this salad. You add them together, you get a complete protein. Well, the theory used to say you needed to do that at the very same meal to get it all at once, but in fact, scientists have discovered that your body knows how to combine those amino acids. So even if you just eat different plant proteins throughout the day, over the course of 2 or 3 days, you'll still be fine, and they'll all combine eventually to create complete proteins that will build your muscles and build your bones and so on in a way that is healthy. So you don't actually need to worry about this anymore if you're eating a nice balanced diet of different proteins. Okay, third category, fats, which we all know and love, right? So fats, the key functions of fats, I want to emphasize that they are so important. And I think we still have a bit of a fear of fat, but fat is important and really good for you. Every single one of your cells in the main membrane has fats. Your brain is 60% fat. So if you don't have the right fats, you're not going to be thinking properly. Your hormones need fats to function. So to make those hormones, those sex hormones, you need fat. So many things require fat functioning in the body. Fats are called lipids, and lipids contain both fat, which is solids, and oils, which is liquid. I'll talk about that in a second. But fat requirements, most experts would say about 20 to 30% of your calories should come from fat. So again, you want to be sure that you keep track and that you have a nice healthy balance. So as I said, fats, those are the different kinds. They come in two types, lipids and fats and oils, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But I see the general categories of the types of fats as natural fats, which are naturally existing in our foods. You don't have to do anything to the food to get them. And the human-made fats that I'll talk about after that. So the natural ones are things like if you have a piece of meat and you notice a stripe of fat in it. It's there naturally, it's part of the food in its natural state. That's a natural fat. The fat that comes in olives, for instance, from which we get olive oil, I consider that a natural fat. Almonds, they contain fats. So natural fats can be divided into saturated and unsaturated. And the saturated fats, basically the way to remember the difference is saturated fats are solid at room temperature. So again, like that piece of striping in your steak, if you leave it out on the counter, it's not going to melt into liquid. Similarly, if you think about even butter, it doesn't melt into a pool of liquid unless it's really hot in the room. It will be soft, but it'll stay semi-solid. So that means it's got a good amount of saturated fat in it. And the same with plant-based fats, like coconut oil is solid at room temperature. It will melt above 115 Fahrenheit, which I think is about 38 or 39 Celsius, something like that. But it is normally solid at room temperature. Unsaturated fats, on the other hand, are liquid at room temperature. So those are your vegetable oils that come in polyunsaturated and saturated. And then you've got things like monounsaturated. That just means it's one molecule. Things like avocado oil or olive oil are considered monounsaturated. And again, I'm going through this a little quickly, but this is on the handout too if you need to double check that. Polyunsaturated oils are other vegetable oils like safflower, sunflower, and so on. But just your regular vegetable oils. And those, all of the unsaturated oils are best not heated. The human-made or man-made, if you want to call it, oils are the ones that are problematic. So those are things like hydrogenated fats. And a hydrogenated fat just means they took an oil that was naturally liquid at room temperature, like an olive oil, and they chemically altered it so that it would become solid at room temperature, like a margarine. So once they do that, the byproduct of hydrogenating oils is trans fatty acids, and those are extremely unhealthy. So you want to avoid trans fats in your food, and you want to avoid rancid fats, which will happen if you leave things like unsaturated fat at room temperature for too long. So that's something to be aware of in your foods as well. Okay, so macronutrients. What I'm going to ask, I'm going to take a really few seconds here just to take a look at the chat. If there are any major questions about that, put them in the chat box and I will take a look at them. And in the meantime, I'm going to just move to the next topic, which is the difference between whole foods and processed foods and natural versus organic. So a whole food is exactly what it sounds like. It means that you have the food in its natural whole form and you haven't done anything to it. So like an apple, just a plain old apple when it comes off the tree, or a walnut, excuse me, or a walnut. Now, these walnuts have been taken out of the shell, so they're not technically whole, but the way we eat them, we don't eat the shell, so I would consider that a whole food. Whereas processed means something has been changed. It's not in its natural state. It has been altered in some way. And that's like these. They had to add things to them or take things away from them. So the technical definition of processed, this comes from a nutrition writer named Carol Ann Rinsler. And she says, processed includes any technique that alters the natural state of food, everything from cooking to freezing to pickling to drying and more. So basically, if you think about adding preservatives or any kind of processing that kills bacteria, like pasteurizing or heating, flash heating, or something that changes the texture of a food, like emulsifying it so that it's creamier, like processed ice creams, for instance. That's all processing. Even adding extra vitamins and minerals is considered processing. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like these are foods that are processed that I consider totally fine, even though they're processed, because they haven't added anything I consider negative. But when you're thinking about the specific foods that you are allowed to eat or that you're trying to change your diet to eat, that's where processed foods can become problematic, because you don't always know if it has 15 ingredients, which are the ones that are okay for you. And that's where I think initially it's actually much more beneficial to stick with whole foods as much as you possibly can, because we all know an apple is just an apple. It has no gluten, it has no dairy, it has nothing added. Whereas applesauce may have gluten in it. There could be cross-contamination. So you really do want to try to stick to unprocessed as much as you can. And I actually did a video on this on my blog about what I consider processed and unprocessed, and which forms of processing I would eat. So I can add a link to that as well for people if you're interested. Then we have natural versus organic. And so I would ask you, do you think that you could have an organic food that's actually bad for you? What do people think? Is it possible to buy organic food that's unhealthy? I'll let you think about that for a second. And I wish the chat box was a little faster, but I'd love to know what you think. So organic simply means it hasn't been treated with certain things. It's been grown in a particular way, but not necessarily that it's healthy. You could have organic Oreos, for instance. So I want to spend just a second talking about these two things. Natural means, as I was just saying when I was talking about processed and unprocessed, a natural food is basically unprocessed. It's created in a way, so if you're buying, let's say, something that's packaged, they have tried not to alter the original food, and they've done their best to keep it in a form that's as close as possible to its original form. And I see Mary Kroll has answered, yes, it could still be processed. So organic could absolutely be processed, and that's exactly what I was just saying. So organic just means it's grown a certain way. And then they can take those ingredients that were grown a certain way and do whatever. They could process them. So in the US, the definition of organic, I took this from the USDA website. Organic agriculture produces products using methods that preserve the environment and avoid most synthetic materials such as pesticides and antibiotics. So they don't add anything like that that's chemical to it. USDA organic standards describe how farmers grow crops and raise livestock. So these are some of the points that they mention. They have different points about how they have their farms set up and so on. And then it says, organic farms and processors preserve natural resources and biodiversity, great, support animal health and welfare, provide access to the outdoors so that animals can exercise their natural behaviors if they're, say, an organic dairy farm, use only approved materials, do not use genetically modified ingredients, receive annual on-site inspections, separate organic food from non-organic food. To me, those last three are the most important ones because they do not use genetically modified ingredients. In fact, it's illegal. If you're growing something and labeling it organic, you are not allowed to have anything genetically modified. And that's crucial because nowadays, up to, I think it's perhaps upwards of 90% of certain crops are genetically modified in the US. So for instance, potatoes and wheat and soy and corn and linseed, I believe, which is flax. Those are all mostly genetically modified. And the other thing that's a bit horrifying to me is there is no legal requirement to tell you, the consumer, if you're buying something that's genetically modified. So the only way to know that it's not genetically modified is if it is organic. So that's a really important trait of organic, is it's not genetically modified. And also there are on-site inspections every year. I think that's important because we know what we're getting is truly organic. They also separate the organic from the non-organic. So again, you know you're not getting something GMO or genetically modified unless by accident, if the farm next door is using those kind of seeds and some of them are blown over by the wind. But in general, that's your safest food as far as I'm concerned, is the organic. And I know it's really expensive, and that's something we're going to talk about down the road as well. We can talk about, you know, keeping the cost down. But I just included this picture because I wanted to show you Navitas Naturals cacao powder, two of my favorite things, cacao and stevia leaf, which I sweeten with. I sweeten my cacao with my stevia. This is an American. It originates in the U.S., so it's USDA organic. This one you can't really see; it's kind of small. But Organic Traditions is a Canadian company, and this is stevia leaf powder, and it's EcoCert, which is the Canadian certification. So it's a little bit less clear in Canada, but we tend to follow the rules of the U.S. And Mary Winstanley, I'd love to know if there's a specific New Zealand certification. As far as I know, if there's anyone else who's outside North America on the class right now, let us know if there's a particular certification where you are. I'd love to know, because I know the US and the Canadian, obviously, but I'm not that familiar with other international forms of organic certification. So they're very similar. In Canada, a food has to be 95% organic to get that label that says organic. So again, you know, you want to be careful of your food. You're changing your diet for your health. You want to be sure that what you buy is healthy. So speaking of labels, like organic labels, I want to talk a little bit about nutrition labels. And I apologize, these are the American ones, but they're very similar in Canada, and also I imagine on products around the world. If you have nutrition labels, what kind of information is there and what does it mean? So this is just a nutrition label that I pulled up from a random product, but because it shows you all the different parts of the label that I wanted to talk about, over here, right at the top, very important to take a look at this. What are they considering a serving size? So whatever this is, they have said one serving is one package. So the whole package is considered one serving. But sometimes what you'll see is, let's say it's a box, you know, I see this on, let's say, bags of potato chips. And you look up here and you think, oh, you know, it's only 70 calories. But then when you check the serving size, it's 8 potato chips. I don't know about you, but I find it hard to stop at 8. So you want to be sure that you're determining these nutritional values based on what your serving size is, because it may not match the one that's up at the top of the label, as with the calories, for instance. So most labels will talk about calories, and that's per serving size. Then they'll give you the fat breakdown. And so they'll mention how much saturated fat and how much trans fat. So as I was saying, the one you really want to watch out for is trans fat, because that's the one that's unhealthy and it's going to affect your cardiovascular system. And I'm just going to quickly, I see Agnes is asking, does EcoCert also guarantee non-GMO products? Yes, as far as I know, in Canada, if something is considered organic, it is non-GMO. It's actually, you're not allowed to use GMO, you're not allowed to grow GMO products that have an organic label. So just quickly back to the fat. Trans fat, as I said, is the usually hydrogenated fat, creates trans fat or trans fatty acids. It looks like whatever this was has no trans fat, so I don't need to worry about that here. It's not even an issue. And then you're going to have cholesterol listed underneath the fats. And just one thing to keep in mind, cholesterol is a byproduct of animal foods. if you're eating a plant-based food, so vegetables or nuts or seeds or even that saturated coconut oil that I was talking about, if it comes from a plant, it has zero cholesterol. You will never find cholesterol coming from a plant. So if that's an issue for you, or if you're concerned about cholesterol, plant-based foods are a great thing to eat. Sodium, it'll tell you how many milligrams a serving has, and then this is what percentage of your daily recommendation it's supposed to be. So sodium, most of us think of as coming from salt. The daily recommendations are no less than, or a minimum of 1,500 milligrams, and an upper limit of 2,300 milligrams, so 60 is pretty good. If you're consuming sea salt, which has a nice array of minerals, usually sodium is not a problem, is not an issue. So my husband years ago was diagnosed with high blood pressure, and we changed his diet and we got it under control. And now he uses salt all the time, but he uses sea salt. So for him, that's not an issue at all. And as I was saying, carbohydrates. Now, there is no real daily recommendation for carbs because our bodies don't need carbs. We could be 100% healthy if we never ate carbs at all. I know, but we'd be sad though, even though we might be healthy. So, but there is no general recommendation for carbs. So this, as I said, it's recommended around 50 to 70%, but you don't necessarily need carbs. Dietary fiber, 8 grams. The recommendation for fiber is between 25 to 30 grams a day. And I'll just say that if you are eating a lot of vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds and beans and legumes, you will not at all need to worry about your fiber intake because those foods are so high in fiber, it's going to add up really quickly. I'm just going to give you a couple of quick examples here. So flax seeds, you get 2 grams of fiber per tablespoon. One pear has 5 grams. Half a cup of almonds has 8 grams. And one avocado, hold on to your seats, has 17 grams of fiber, which is like half of your daily recommendation. So if you eat one avocado, you're set. You're 50% of your fiber for the day. So really, I mean, I don't even think about my fiber. I just know that I'm getting way more than I need. And then down here on the bottom, if these are what are called the micronutrients. So these are things that our body can make, but also we get from food. Vitamin A, C, calcium. Down here, they'll just tell you if any of those are present in the food that you're eating and how much it is. And then it's based on a 2,000 calorie diet. If you're interested in finding out, and again, I don't count this on a daily basis because I know that I'm getting just a well-rounded diet. And you know, if you're aware of what is a macronutrient, like which ones are proteins, fats, and carbs, and you try for a good mix, you're generally going to get a well-balanced diet. But if you're interested in adding it up and just seeing how you do just for fun, there's this site, nutritiondata.com, which is a great place to go. They have most foods there, and it'll actually let you key in the foods that you're thinking that you're eating, and then it'll give you a label like this, but for your whole day. So you can see how many calories you ate in a day. And I guess actually I don't use apps like that, but of course apps like there are, what is it, My Nutrition Pal, or I think it's called My Nutrition Pal or My Fitness Pal, that will do that for you anyway. But this is a good site if you're looking for that. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about is, because I know for some of you these are new foods that you're going to be looking for, unfamiliar foods, and you want to look at where can you find them. So the first and best source always is a local farm or farmer or a local market. And the reason I say that is because, as I said, even if it's if you're not looking for organic, or if you feel that organic's too expensive, or you can't, you're not sure, once you get to know these guys at the local markets, you'll find that a lot of them are actually using organic principles, but they're not labeled organic because it costs the farmer a lot to become a certified organic farm. So some of the farmers, like in my local area, they grow things organically. They don't use pesticides. They try not to give antibiotics, et cetera, but they just don't have that label. So if I knew that, I would be much more comfortable buying their food, for instance. I see Mary is saying, yes, New Zealand does have organic certification and it's quite strict, which is great. Yeah, my understanding is that they are actually quite strict and they do surprise visits. And so when you get that organic label, it truly is organic. And it's, I think, very important to be able to trust that when you're buying your food. So the second best place, or actually it's not the second best, it's just another place where you can buy these kinds of foods, are health food stores, things like Whole Foods Market if you have it, or in the States, I know that Trader Joe's has a lot of the kinds of ingredients that I'm going to be talking about, as does, I was out in the Dallas area last year, and they have a market called Sprouts, which is a health food market. So any kind of health food store or health food market is going to probably have a lot of the ingredients that may be new to you. Like for me, quinoa or you know, when I was writing my last cookbook, Naturally Sweet and Gluten Free, the second to last cookbook, a lot of the testers were telling me they couldn't find whole millet in their neighborhood, and so they just ordered it online, and that's my last recommendation there. So sometimes if you can't get it in the store, they'll order it in for you. Those are really great places to shop. And you might be surprised to find that regular supermarkets have this kind of food too. Here in the Toronto area, there's a line of supermarkets called Loblaws and Fortinos and No Frills, and they have natural food sections within the supermarket where they have a lot of these kinds of ingredients. And then, you know, if everything else fails, or sometimes even if you could go to the stores, you might prefer to shop online because it'll be delivered right to your door. And a lot of the online stores don't charge for shipping if you buy a certain amount. So for instance, in the US, there are places like nuts.com. And again, I'll put all these on the resource page for you. I'll put links to all these. But nuts.com, which has obviously nuts and seeds and kind of dry goods like that, bulk foods like that. iHerb.com, which mostly supplements, but they do have some foods as well, some great protein powders and things like that that you can get at iHerb. There's Vitacost.com and VitaSave in Canada. Thrive Market in the US is a terrific online store. And then in Canada, we have well.ca. Lowcarbcanada.com has a lot of good products, Truly Organic and UpayaNaturals.com. I'll share all of those on the site with you. And then I was surprised, as I said, when I did my cookbook, to discover that Amazon has some amazing foods if they deliver groceries in your area. And Amazon.ca in Canada has just started delivering food as well. So it's well worth a look. You'll be surprised that some of the foods that you can find anywhere else, you actually can find on Amazon. Okay. So I know that's a lot of information. I sort of jumped from some things to other things, but I wanted to give you that foundation. I'm going to go back to me now. And there I am. So I wanted to give you that as a kind of foundation because I think that is a good place to start no matter what your particular dietary restrictions. I think it's really important to remember that whole foods, natural foods, if you can get organic foods, those, you know, most people are on these diets because of health issues, and those are the kinds of foods that are going to best help your health issues as well. So I wanted you to have that basis. But let's take some time. I'd love to answer any questions if there's anything that came up. That's the beauty of doing this live. So I know I keep saying this, but I know there's a little delay, so I'm going to just refresh the page, and I'll take a sip of my tea in the meantime because my throat is getting a little dry. And let me know if there's anything that you would like me to answer here. And if not, of course, you can always write it in the Facebook group too. So any questions about anything we talked about, and actually anything maybe that we didn't talk about? Do you have any questions about the course or what's coming up? I've got the different topics per week listed on the portal page, just so you know, you have an idea of what's to come. And what I would love actually from you guys, as I said, I'm going to send you a survey, but what I'd love to know is, great question, Jacqueline, just give me a second. What I'd love to know is, you know, as you see the different topics, gluten-free, egg, dairy, are there specific subjects within that topic you would like me to cover that I can add to the curriculum that I have so far? And when I do the survey, I will ask you if there are other allergies or food restrictions that you would like me to also talk about. So I know Mary said soy and corn, for instance. So Jacqueline is asking, are flours considered as processed food? Yes, yes, they are. So, you know, they're not a bad processed food. So, you know, most people, when they think of processed foods, they think of I don't know, like Pringles, right? Like it doesn't even resemble potatoes, real potatoes anymore. And from what I understand, Pringles are only like a small percentage actual potato. They're mostly chemicals. But man, I used to love them. But anyway, so Pringles. But flour, what's interesting, and I just talked about this actually on a video on my site as well. Flour is technically a processed food because it's changed from its original form. And the difficulty for me as someone with candida with flour is, especially like there's refined flours and then there's whole grain flours. Refined flours are the white stuff that is converted to sugar literally like almost instantaneously in the body, whereas whole grain flour is a little bit slower because they keep the whole grain. But the problem is it's ground up, which means that the surface area of that grain now, the enzymes that break it down and convert it to sugar, they have so much more to attack because with a whole grain, if you've ever seen a whole grain, if you think of like steel cut oats or even like a grain of, I get oat groats, which are not even cut, or barley, for instance, it's got a coating around it. It's got layers. Your body has to break that down before it's converted to sugar. With flour, that happens really quickly. So what's interesting is I have trouble with flour-based products. I still eat them because, I mean, I do bake and whatnot. I just can't eat them very often. And what I find is if I was doing some testing a while back for some sweet stuff, and so I was probably eating some treats a little more often than I should have, right? Like maybe I was having a couple brownies in a day and then I did the same thing the next day. And even though they were sugar-free, gluten-free, egg-free, dairy-free, healthy brownies, for me, I figured out that it was the fact they were made with flour. They were converting more quickly to sugar. So when I want to do something with a baked good now, like I love pancakes, I don't use flour anymore for my pancakes. I take the whole grain. I'll usually take millet or quinoa or buckwheat. And buckwheat is technically not a grain, but we think of it as grain. So I'll take those whole grains and I will grind them up in a coffee grinder to make a powder, and I'll use that right away. So it hasn't had time to degrade. It hasn't had time to become oxidized, and it's still not quite as fine as the flour that you're going to buy, which has also probably been bleached and also been heated, and those aren't if you take the whole grain and grind it up. So for me, I find that works way better than actually using a flour that I buy. And also, grains will stay fresh much longer than a flour. So if I can keep the grains in a jar in my pantry and only grind up what I need as I need it. The flour that I buy, I have to store in the fridge or freezer, and I have to be sure to use it before it goes rancid because whole grain flour still has the fat layer of the grain in it, which is the part that can go rancid. And so that's why if you buy fresh whole grain flours, you really should store them in a cold place, in a dark place, ideally. So I hope that answers your question, Jacqueline. Let me know if there's anything else. So Agnes says, table salt has iodine added, but not sea salt as far as I know. Is this something to consider as a meal planning? Agnes, sea salt has iodine in it naturally because that's part of the natural array of minerals. So it has sodium, it has iodine, and it has other minerals as well, magnesium, calcium, whole bunch of other ones I'm probably forgetting. So that's the beauty of a really good quality sea salt. It will have those things in it. If you're looking for natural sources of iodine, seaweed is great as well. It's if someone has thyroid issues, they're often if they see a natural nutritionist, they're told to eat seaweed. So I wouldn't worry about that in terms of the sodium. Okay, and Agnes is saying, can you add nightshades to the food allergy list? Of course you can. Yes, actually, I have a great recipe. I'll see if I can dig it up because I haven't made it in a long time because I don't have a particular allergy to nightshades, and I do still eat some nightshades. But there's a wonderful pasta sauce I guess it's called red sauce rather than tomato sauce. So nightshades are vegetables that I'm not sure why they're called nightshades, but they're vegetables that can be very inflammatory for people. So if you have arthritis or if you have any kind of inflammatory condition, it's actually a good idea to cut nightshades out of your diet. And nightshades, the vegetables considered nightshades are tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, peppers, and believe it or not, tobacco is one of the nightshades. It's considered a nightshade. So people who are cutting out nightshades should cut out those vegetables. And there's a wonderful pasta sauce called the red sauce that's made without tomatoes, without peppers, and I served it to my husband, and he did not know he was eating something that wasn't tomato sauce. he thought he was eating tomato sauce. So I'm going to dig that up for you, Agnes, because that is a great recipe, and I'd love to share that with you. All right. Any other last questions for tonight? And if anything comes up between now and next week, obviously, please just hop on the Facebook group, leave a message there. And I'm on that group at least once a day. I try to get in more than just once a day, but I'll answer questions in there for you folks. I love hopping in there and seeing what you're up to. So let me know if there's anything else now, but if not, I know I've kept you a little bit past an hour, and what I forgot to say at the beginning was I'm going to try to keep the classes to an hour, and sometimes our questions may go beyond, but certainly anything to do with the lecture will go an hour. And next week, hopefully it will be a little more interactive, because I'm going to be talking about gluten-free, and I'm going to be showing you some foods and things too. I really wanted to do this in my kitchen where I could cook right in front of you, but unfortunately, my internet is not participating with me. It's not cooperating. So we upgraded our internet, and we still can't get it to work down in the kitchen. But I will work on that, and as soon as that happens, then maybe we can actually do like a recipe demo or something. Because I think with gluten-free, it's also really important to see the texture, and I can describe it, but I would love to show you that. If not, I'll take pictures and I'll show you that instead, or I'll do a little video and I'll upload that to the page. But next week is gluten-free. So if there's anything specific about gluten-free that you want to know, send the questions, and I will send you that survey where I ask a little bit more about your food restrictions, and then I'll be able to add things like the nightshades or the soy or the corn as we go through, and we'll fit those in for sure as we go along. Okay, folks. Well, it looks like there's no more questions. I'll just refresh one more time just in case. And you can always leave a question in the Facebook group. So it was great talking to you tonight. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you in the Facebook group in that case. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your night or day, depending where you are. Bye.